You are inspiring so many people with the show. You have a good karma.
There's no happy ending. Let's start at the beginning.
Anthony Bourdain.
Anthony Bourdain is here with us today.
Anthony Bourdain! Oh!
First gained notoriety with his book, Kitchen Confidential, a tell-all look at the restaurant business.
He's a great ambassador for the sport.
He became addicted to jiu-jitsu.
1 minute I was standing next to a deep fryer, and the next I was watching the sunset over the Sahara. I can't believe you said that.
Yeah,
Good karma?
I think so. Well...
Well, when I wrote Kitchen Confidential, I was a completely broke, stressed out 44-year-old working as he had always worked his entire life in a not particularly great or famous restaurant kitchen, standing next to a deep fryer.
I didn't know how I was ever going to pay my rent. I didn't know how I was ever going to pay the 10 years of back taxes I owed. I didn't know how I was going to ever climb out of debt or ever afford health insurance or any of those things.
I was a frightened, angry, desperate character who'd seen almost nothing of the world.
Were there times where you just thought, I'm just not sure this is going to work? I don't know how I see my way to the end of this.
I honestly had no plan to live past 30. I really bought into the 60s, early 70s ethic of live fast, die. I mean, I really believed it, and I lived my life that way. That changed overnight.
I wrote an article. My mom actually said, you should send it to the New Yorker.
In 1999, when Anthony was 44, he sent a humorous and slightly shocking essay to the New Yorker magazine about the realities of working in a restaurant kitchen.
Called Don't Eat Before Reading This.
They ran that piece and suddenly everything changed.
And I mean, the next day I got a call saying, we'll give you 50 grand to write a book. I'm no dummy. I'm dunking French fries at age 44. I'll write the damn book.
That led to his best-selling memoir, Kitchen Confidential, Adventures in the Culinary Underbelly.
Oh, I didn't think anyone was going to read the damn book, which is, I thought I wrote it for my fry cook, basically. I thought if my fry cook finds this book funny, then it's a win. I never thought the book would travel as far west as Philadelphia. It was such a New York-centric book. I hadn't seen anything of the world when I wrote Kitchen Confidential.
Soon after that, he landed his first TV show, A Cook's Tour, which aired on the Food Network. It was the beginning of his rise to fame.
You used to put down the Food Network a lot, make fun of the Food Network. Then they gave you your own show on the Food Network.
Yeah.
How did that happen, first of all? Didn't they know that you were out there bad-mouthing them?
Yeah, irony sucks.
You were a chef and now you're a celebrity.
The best role model you could have in American food television, I think, is Julia Child. She changed the world.
It seems like just a few years ago there was one or two television chefs. There was Julia Child, and then maybe Jacques Pepin, and then that seemed like to be pretty much the run of the mill as far as TV chefs go. And now they're just everywhere, for God's sakes.
Yeah, they're popping up everywhere, aren't they?
Why do you get so mad at some of the people on TV? You go after them relentlessly.
I made a living for years making fun of poor Emerald.
You really go after them.
Maybe I'm having an internal argument with myself. When I see somebody, it's like, okay, you've already got the cookware and the crummy spice mix and the branded knives and the aprons. Do you really need mattresses, all-you-can-eat buffets, and a diabetes medication?
So we went to Bourdain. You brought Paula into the debate.
Maybe it's because it's an argument with myself. I'm saying, why can't I do that? Why can't I just endorse a whole bunch of cynical crap?
Is it a matter of integrity?
No, it's vanity on my part. At the end of the day, I will be crushed under the wheels of history, and they will go on selling their mattresses and their crummy spice mixes. Being the center of attention comes along with a measure of freedom to go the places I want to go and do the things I want to do.
I think, too, there was this disconnect between the guy that he was before he got famous and the guy after.
I have the best job in the world, and I'm milking it for everything I can get.
But I think he was always waiting for someone to pull the rug out from under him.
Anthony, can you tell us about when you were growing up and you would go to France?
And it's where we spent many happy summers as a family.
He ate snails that first summer in France, too.
That first summer in France, visiting his father's family, a 10-year-old Tony ate his first oyster, and his world was never the same.
At the time, I didn't come out of that experience saying I want to be a chef. But I think that exposure to good butter, good cheese, oysters, good sausage. That clearly resonated later.
He always had this interest in good tastes, good smells. From a very young age, he loved to try new things.
From age 13 or 14 on, me and my friends defined ourselves by not just what records we were listening to, but what drugs we were doing, okay? So I arrived in college at age 17, like, where's the coke and the acid?
Didn't the Stooges Funhouse record really set you on a completely different path in your life?
It said something about you in high school if you suddenly showed up with the Stooges album. I mean, you'd really broken with decent society, all your friends, you know, only like meth heads and car freaks really liked the Stooges back then.
Is that when you started getting into drugs and that kind of lifestyle?
I moved from psychedelics into more, you know, less huggy-friendly drugs.
For a long time, I was very, very seriously fearful that he'd wind up in jail or dead. But saving grace, despite all the wretched behavior, he was home for dinner every night.
At age 17, Tony got his first restaurant job, dishwashing at a wedding reception.
I fell into the business accidentally, but it was certainly the only time in my life that I responded well to any kind of structure. I was grateful for it. It was the first time that I went home with any reason to be proud of myself. It was the first time that I cared about anybody else's opinion of me. The first time I respected myself or anybody else. I definitely, it was a perfect mix of romance and, you know, piratical attitudes and sex and drugs and rock and roll. That's true.
They dressed like pirates, they carried big badass knives, they stole everything in sight, they drank for free, they had these incredibly prolific social lives, shall we say.
Sure.
That looked good to me.
Yeah.
Had I not become a dishwasher, I would have spiraled into petty crime, you know, Loserville. I wouldn't have made it out of my 20s for sure. It was that structure. It was the first hierarchy and structure and quantifiable organization and system of value system that I recognized that I needed it, and I was grateful for it, and I liked it, obviously. I fell in love with the life long before I started to get serious about food. It's a meritocracy. You're no good, you're fired. You know, you show up late too many times, you're out. You can't make the food consistently, you're gone. Clean out your locker, okay? What's great about this business, the things I'm talking about, being a refugee, a misfit, all of those things, that's the best thing about our business. I don't care whether you were convicted of arson, your sexual preference, your sex, your race, your nation of origin, your legal status, your unlovely personal habits. I don't care about any of those things. It is a melting pot, it is a unique workspace, unlike any other, where you are essentially forced to work with people who in any other industry you might not ever be friends with, be intimate with, be close to, trust, and communicate with. All I care about is what can you do?
His passion for good food and for how it can make the world a better place was recently put to the test in Beirut.
On the 12th of July 2006, a violent conflict erupted between Israel and neighboring Lebanon. It began when a military unit of Hezbollah, a Shia Muslim group based in Lebanon, crossed the border and ambushed a group of Israeli soldiers.
Me and my crew found ourselves in the middle of a war. First of all, it changed my attitude about the world. It was a very embittering, angering experience. So we start to hear automatic weapons fire like a neighborhood away. And a few seconds later, the cars with Hezbollah supporters start to drive by waving flags and celebrating the capture, kidnapping of the Israeli soldiers. You know, we watched a country destroyed. Up to that point, I guess I'd begun to believe that everything could be okay in the world if we could all just sit down and eat together. I guess I'd come to think that. I'd allow myself to become hopeful.
Beirut was a serious jolt, but now, back in New York, he recently got a different kind of jolt.
When the war started and they bombed the airport and he was stuck there and it was really dramatic. And when he finally came back, that very same day, that's when we conceived our child, because we were like, you know what, life is too short. So I remember going to the Prudential Center for Gina Carano's fight. It was 2008. I was like, whoa, you know, girls can do that. It's great. It was like really inspiring, but I still was not convinced about you know, trying groundwork myself.
What I started to notice that she was enjoying the gym. She was enjoying kicking the shit out of guys at the gym particularly. And just started an escalation into full MMA training with an accent on jiu-jitsu, at which point it was pretty much becoming you know, a full-time job. Well, first of all, I'm really proud of my wife. She's come a long way in a short period of time. I see how hard she works and how determined and focused on this. You know, this is not a hobby. This is something she's really serious about. I get it. I like watching it. I understand why Otavia does it, but at this point in my life, I'm more about a life of leisure during those moments when I'm not working.
He went on to host No Reservations on the Travel Channel, and then in 2012 joined CNN.
Your show's heading over to CNN after leaving the Travel Channel. It seemed to end on a little dicey note over at the Travel Channel. What happened?
I turned on the last episode of my show and saw myself in a car commercial, a perfectly nice car, but a car I don't drive and I certainly don't endorse. And you know, I sort of feel before you put me in a commercial, you should ask.
Parts Unknown, which won plenty of awards over the years, was far more than a show about just cooking and eating. Anthony was a great storyteller. His voice was unique and fearless. He was as interested in politics and music and culture as what was cooking on the stove.
You seem awfully mellow today. Is there a particular reason for that?
I'm coming right from jiu-jitsu, actually.
One of those things that, oh, my wife does that, and, you know, that's not really my thing. But eventually it got to the point where, you know, he did a class with our second cousins in New York and tried it out. And like most people, just was instantly hooked.
He was addicted to jiu-jitsu. That was
oh, really?
Yeah, he was doing jiu-jitsu like literally every day.
There are many celebrities that practice, you know, but Anthony was one of the most outspoken about what jiu-jitsu was for him and how much it has changed his life.
It's become something of an obsession. Because, I mean, that seems like something that I have known for a long time rather than some new sort of martial arts things.
I started at 58. It's the last...
When you were 58?
Yeah. It's the last thing in the world I could have ever imagined wanting to do or enjoying. I've never been hung out in a gym. I've never really cared about those things. I think it can best be explained by, at my age, to learn an entirely new skill is deeply satisfying. To recreate that feeling of being the lowest person on the totem pole in a kitchen back when I was 17, knowing nothing in a very hard world, the incremental, tiny satisfactions of being a little less awful at something every day. It's like that with jiu-jitsu for me. I'm learning an entirely new skill, a very difficult one, very physically demanding one, but one that I think about for the rest of the day. They call it, physical chess, because it's something you think about.
He was a great ambassador because he was so passionate about jiu-jitsu, and he made a point of including it on his extremely popular TV shows. It was all over his Instagram, and he was able to reach a whole new sort of audience with that.
And we were on a pheasant hunt in Montana, and we were rolling around on the ground. I'm showing the Japanese necktie to him because I'm explaining to him, like, if you can't sink a darce up, I'm like, you got long arms. I'm like, you got to learn the Japanese necktie. So we're like rolling around on the fucking ground, and I'm explaining the Japanese necktie to him.
Sometimes his addictions were good, like jiu-jitsu and exercising or family, but sometimes they could be destructive, like cigarette smoking and drinking and even, I would say, workaholism.
He fought in a jiu-jitsu tournament when he was like, I think he was like 58 or 59.
That's crazy.
Yeah, he got so into it that he wanted to compete, and he won. Yeah, he competed and won.
You devoted your book to family.
Yep.
The joys of being normal. You sort of wrote about that as a new experience. Yeah. And now you've split. Are you rethinking about being normal, or where's your...
I mean, what is normal? I think, what does the American family look like? I mean, I travel 250 days a year.
And with his lifestyle and his television shows and traveling all over the world, he just became this jiu-jitsu nomad that would drop in and train at really any jiu-jitsu school he can get access to.
You know, I was feeling really bad about being away from my daughter so much, and at one point I came home exhausted, and I said, honey, I'm really thinking about, hanging it up maybe in a year or two so I could spend more time with you. She burst into tears. She said, no, Daddy, your job is so interesting. What will I tell my friends?
Chef, author, and television host Anthony Bourdain found dead in his hotel room in France of an apparent suicide. He was 61 years old.
Fans of celebrity chef Anthony Bourdain gathered at the New York City restaurant where he once worked to pay tribute to him.
The world suffered because of that, and his family suffered, and his daughter suffered. It's like, fuck, man, I know that those feelings are there, but you can fight those off, and there will be a better day. And the thing that helps you in those better days are friends. And I don't think I was quite close enough to him for him to reach out. But if he did, I think I could have helped.
The flip side of that is a sense of spoiled romanticism, a disappointment with the way the world turned out. It was supposed to be far more beautiful and romantic and gentle, and I learned pretty early on it wasn't going to be like that.
One of the unfortunate things about somebody who obviously has some kind of tragic part to them is, does that undermine or somehow diminish the message they were trying to get out there? Does it make what he was attempting to show us by going to places like, Libya and Congo, does it diminish what he was trying to show us and tell us? I don't have an answer. I hope not.
By the time of his death, Anthony had visited more than 80 countries, many of them multiple times.
Tony was the advocate in our society for how we can treat people on the far side of the planet as dimensional people who have their own dreams and loves and families and hopes.
Look at the incredible impact that you made in connecting humanity. That to me is like his really beautiful legacy.
The fact that he had started so late in his life was what made him one of the greatest ambassadors jiu-jitsu has ever had.
So Buchecha in our culture is the biggest ambassador for jiu-jitsu, but then you have an older guy as a white belt who is actually the biggest ambassador of jiu-jitsu.
That one makes me sad.
Jiu-jitsu is not an automatic cure for these things, right? I think that's what you were kind of saying a little bit there.
It's been a wild ride. If I do have any advice for anybody, any final thought, if I'm an advocate for anything, it's to move as far as you can, as much as you can, across the ocean or simply across the river. The extent to which you can walk in somebody else's shoes or at least eat their food, it's a plus for everybody.
There's no guarantees how long we're going to be here. Just enjoy life.